Amid the tension, a figure in plain clothes strides toward the bench. Nathan Reed, a black federal judge known for his quiet command. His robe still folded under his arm after a late arrival. He's moments from taking his place when Officer Tiffany Rurk, a cop with a badge polished by years of untouchable swagger, steps into his path. Her hand flies before her mind catches up. A sharp slap across his face. A barked, "Where do you think you're going?" slicing through the stunned silence. She sees a target, not a titan. And in that split second, her empire of fear and favor begins to tremble. This isn't just a story of a single strike. It's the unraveling of a shield built on silence, the slow crumble of a system that looked the other way, and the rise of a man who turns a moment of humiliation into a mirror for the truth. Watch as one misstep ignites a fire, and as the pieces fall, revealing what power really means when the mask slips. In the crowded courtroom of Birmingham, Alabama, the atmosphere pulsed with a tense blend of solemnity and barely contained anticipation. The richly paneled walls, adorned with intricate wood carvings and deep mahogany trim, exuded an age-old dignity, their scent of polished wood and aged leather permeating the room. In the background, the steady, rhythmic sound of a judge's gavel struck against a wooden block resonated throughout, reinforcing the gravitas of the occasion. Reporters and spectators whispered in low, hushed tones as they scribbled notes, their eyes wide with both curiosity and apprehension, while the courtroom's marble floors absorbed every footstep with measured echo. At the center of this charged setting stood Officer Tiffany Rurk, resplendent in her impeccably tailored police uniform with badges gleaming under the courtroom's stark lights. Known for her ruthless reputation and her penchant for racist pranks, Tiffany's eyes burned with haughty indignation. She positioned herself near the entrance of the courtroom, her posture rigid and unyielding, a sentinel of questionable authority amid the orderly chaos of legal proceedings. Just as the courtroom settled into a stillness punctuated only by the soft clack of the gavel's echoes, a man in civilian clothes, Nathan Reed, stepped forward along the corridor leading to the judge's dock. His posture was calm and dignified despite the scrutiny of every eye in the room. Dressed simply in a dark jacket, crisp shirt, and slacks, his smooth, measured gait carried an air of quiet authority that belied his unassuming attire. As he neared the front, Officer Rurk's gaze snapped sharply to him, and with a sudden, brutal motion, she advanced. "Where do you think you're going, boy?" she bellowed, her voice echoing throughout the cavernous chamber. In a flash, her hand connected with Nathan's face in a resounding slap that reverberated against the silent wall. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Shock drew every eye toward the scene. Attorneys paused mid-sentence, the jury shifted uncomfortably in their seats, and reporters craned to capture every moment on their devices. Despite the intensity of the blow, Nathan Reed did not stumble. Instead, he lifted his hand, still tinged with the sting of the impact, and in an even, almost eerily calm tone, he declared, "You just hit the judge of this court." The gravity of his statement cut through the murmurs like a clarion call, revealing that this man, modest in appearance yet exuding an aura of quiet control, was far more than he appeared. The sound of the judge's gavel struck once more, punctuating the moment with its authoritative cadence, while the air filled with the lingering aroma of old wood and the sterile tang of courtroom polish. Faces turned toward Nathan with disbelief. His measured tone and unexpectedly resolute expression contrasted starkly with Officer Rurk's volatile outburst, stirring the room into a stunned silence. In that suspended moment, the duality of the encounter was undeniable. A display of brute force by one, countered by the calm revelation of the other's true identity. But before the shock could give way to any further reaction, the atmosphere shifted abruptly. A series of commands echoed from offstage as bailiffs surged into the courtroom, their faces set in impassive determination. In an ironic twist charged with tumultuous energy, Nathan Reed was suddenly enveloped by the force of law enforcement. Stunned expressions on the faces of the jurors, lawyers, and even some reporters transformed into a mixture of incredulity and fear as he was restrained and handcuffed. The air grew thick with tension, the clamor of whispers rising in a dissonant chorus that mingled with the harsh sound of metal clinking against leather cuffs. It was as if the very principles of justice were being upended in real time. What had begun as a brutal act of racial aggression was rapidly morphing into something far more complex and unsettling. In that fraught moment, as Nathan Reed's calm dignity clashed with the chaotic execution of his arrest, the room seemed to hold its breath. The gavel fell once more, its sound now a mournful punctuation to the scene, while the smell of old wood and the palpable tension in the air underscored the shattering of expectations. The courtroom, once a sanctuary of order and law, now teetered on the edge of scandal and outrage, and the fate of a man who had just declared himself the judge loomed ominously in the charged silence. As the bailiffs tightly secured Nathan Reed's hands with cuffs and led him away, an electric murmur of disbelief stirred within the courtroom. Yet, even as he was restrained, Nathan's composure did not waver. With a measured calm that belied the chaos unfolding around him, he demanded in a steady, clear voice, "Release me immediately. I am the judge of this court." His words rang out, defiant and resonant, sending a ripple of shock across the white-walled chamber. In that instant, as murmurs escalated into a cacophony of confused gasps and tense whispers, Nathan slowly removed his jacket, folding it in a precise, almost ritualistic gesture. He revealed beneath it a neatly pressed, dark judge's robe, carefully folded at the shoulder. This reveal stunned the courtroom into silence. Every eye, from the skeptical legal observers in the gallery to the flashbulbs of hurriedly raised cameras, fixated on this astonishing display of authority. Despite his current predicament, Nathan's calm determination radiated as he stepped forward. With a steady gaze directed at the uniformed officer, Tiffany Rurk, whose face, once so defiant, now betrayed the faint tremor of uncertainty, Nathan spoke softly but firmly. "Your actions here not only breach the dignity of this courtroom but also disgrace the very principles of justice that we uphold." His words, wrapped in an almost unearthly calm, sent a shiver down the spines of everyone present, as if the entire relic of historical justice itself were awakening to correct an injustice. In response to his unexpected proclamation, Officer Rurk sneered, her tone initially mocking as she retorted, "You're nothing but a civilian. You're in the wrong place." But each word faltered as Nathan's presence and conviction filled the room. The atmosphere became charged with a palpable intensity. The sound of the judge's gavel in the background now seemed to underscore the magnitude of his quiet victory over prejudice. Murmurs rippled through the crowd while legal aides and even some of the bailiffs exchanged uneasy glances, unsure how to react to this sudden reversal of power. Unruffled by the shifting tides, Nathan produced his smartphone from his pocket and, with deliberate care, pressed the record button once more. He began speaking directly to the camera, his voice imbued with the cool authority of a man who had borne the weight of injustice long enough. "I have been targeted not only because of my appearance but due to the baseless prejudice that plagues this system," he stated. "Today, we shall not permit such discrimination to go unchallenged." Each syllable carried the weight of both personal pain and professional resolve. Even as the chaotic components of the scene swirled, the low hum of ringing telephones, the rustle of clothing as officers shifted uncomfortably, and the distant, intermingled sounds of the gavel tapping a somber beat, the focus remained solely on Nathan's steady declaration. His voice, both clear and unwavering, cut through the tense silence and demanded the attention of not just the room, but of every mind that had witnessed the incident. The eyes of the courtroom, once accustomed to deference to authority, now turned inquisitively upon him. It was as if the very fabric of the room, its dark mahogany panels, its classic columns, and the lingering scent of polished wood, was attuned to the sudden realignment of power. With slow, deliberate motions, Nathan then pulled out a meticulously folded envelope from his inner jacket pocket. The envelope, crisp and embossed with the Lux seal of justice and official insignia, contained documents that proved his rightful authority. His certificate of appointment as judge, duly signed and verified by the court's board, along with a formal letter from the legal administration confirming his status. Before the bailiffs and the rest of the staff could question this bold act any further, Nathan calmly reached for his phone and dialed a number. The receiver clicked in his ear as his voice, echoing with cool authority, declared, "This is Judge Nathan Reed." I am calling for an immediate report on this incident, and I demand that Officer Tiffany Rurk be suspended pending a full inquiry into her actions over the past years. His words were crisp, the tone of command unmistakable, and in that moment, the courtroom shifted once more, now with a murmur of approval from those who recognized the righteousness in his stand. Amidst the rising tide of tension, whispers began to spread. Some reporters, previously lurking at the edges, scribbled frantically, while others captured every moment on their recording devices. The unexpected turn of events, originating from a single brutal act of aggression, now evolved into a profound call for justice. Every element, the rhythmic clack of the courtroom's ancient clock, the solemn side glances of bitterly disillusioned onlookers, and the low hum of anxious conversations among the jurors, converged to underscore the significance of Nathan Reed's actions. As his call to the police chief concluded, the atmosphere in the room remained electric. The gavel's echoes, now a measured metronome, and the solemn air of historic justice manifested in the timeless, dignified architecture of the courtroom, served as a stage for the inevitable reckoning of long-suppressed prejudice. Seconds later, a sharp voice announced, "Officer Rurk, please step aside." The order, resonating clearly through the now reverberating silence, signaled that the tide had turned, and that justice was not merely a formal procedure, but a living, breathing force set to reclaim its rightful place. In that tense pause, as everyone in the room held their breath, the future of this courtroom, and perhaps the entire system, seemed to hinge on the balance of truth and authority. The room was poised on the brink of monumental change, with Nathan Reed's measured resolve illuminating a path toward accountability, even as the shadows of prejudice trembled in the fading light. In the moments following Nathan Reed's forceful declaration and arrest, the courtroom atmosphere grew even more charged. The gavel's echo still resonated along the paneled walls as whispers escalated into a low, relentless hum of disbelief and anticipation. The previously rigid order was now permeated by murmurs questioning everything, from standard procedure to the very identity of the man being restrained. In a corner of the room, several legal aides exchanged uncertain glances, while reporters continued to record every nuance of this unfolding debacle. Almost immediately, the sound of hurried footsteps approached. It was a police lieutenant stepping into the courtroom. With a sense of urgency, he announced, "Officer Rurk, please step aside for immediate questioning." The words, crisp and authoritative, sliced through the charged silence, forcing Tiffany Rurk to lower her head and edge away, her previously defiant stance now replaced by visible apprehension. For a brief moment, the once verdant confidence in her eyes was clouded by uncertainty, a stark contrast to Nathan's unwavering calm. Nathan, still locked in the gaze of the onlookers, took a measured step forward. Despite his handcuffs, his countenance radiated quiet authority. Retrieving his smartphone once more with deliberate precision, he pressed play on a new video file recorded by a discreet bystander earlier in the day. The grainy footage flickered onto the courtroom's projection screen and revealed scenes that sent shockwaves through the room. It captured numerous instances where Officer Rurk was seen berating black civilians on duty, her tone laced with contempt and unmistakable racist overtones. The video then shifted to show Tiffany's actions during previous patrols. Snide remarks to drivers of color and dismissive gestures that had long been shielded by her supposed impeccable service record. As the footage played, the courtroom fell into breathless silence. Every eye in the room was transfixed on the screen as Nathan's recorded evidence piled up, each frame a stark reminder of the underlying injustice that had brought him here. This evidence, Nathan's measured voice intoned through the speakers, clearly shows a pattern of behavior that is not only unprofessional but morally reprehensible. Officer Rurk's actions are a betrayal of the oath she took, to serve and protect without prejudice. His words, calmly delivered, cut through the stunned silence like a clarion call for accountability. Across the courtroom, tension mounted among the legal professionals. Some jurors shifted uncomfortably, and even a few seasoned attorneys exchanged looks of incredulity. A palpable murmur of agreement began to ripple through the audience. The judge, his expression grave and thoughtful, paused before addressing the interruption. "Mr. Reed," he said slowly, Please understand that the integrity of this court must be maintained, and your allegations will be duly considered. His tone, though formal, carried an undercurrent of sympathy for the disruption of established order. Nathan continued to speak, his tone imbued with both calm resolve and a quiet intensity born of long-held indignation. "I am not just a man in civilian clothes," he declared. "I am Judge Nathan Reed, and these are the truths that have been hidden by prejudice and complacency for far too long." His statement, resonant and unruffled by his current predicament, drew a collective exhale from the room. The recorded evidence and his official documents, which he held tightly in his grasp, were powerful testaments that resonated clearly in that historic moment. With every word, the courtroom seemed to tremble on the precipice of transformation. A murmur of approval and outrage began to ripple among the spectators. The judge's gavel lay silent for a heartbeat as the authorities, pressed by the mounting evidence and the raw force of Nathan's conviction, prepared to take further decisive action. In that charged pause, as the projection screen continued to loop the damning footage and every witness in the room bore expression of astonished resolve, the scales of justice appeared to shift imperceptibly. The previously unchallenged authority of Officer Tiffany Rurk was now unraveling before everyone, exposing secrets that the institutional silence had long concealed. At that moment, a clear, sharp voice from the side of the bench commanded attention. "All due procedures will be observed. Officer Rurk, you are to be suspended pending a full investigation." The announcement rippled through the courtroom, intensifying the fervor of the moment. With that pronouncement, the already tense atmosphere took on a sense of imminent transformative justice. The weight of evidence, the quiet authority of Nathan Reed, and the admission of the judge all converged to mark the beginning of a reckoning that promised to challenge long-standing prejudices within the system. The tension in the courtroom reached a fevered pitch as the judge's order resonated in every corner of the room. "Officer Tiffany Rurk, you are hereby suspended pending a full investigation." Almost immediately, murmurs turned to thunderous silence. The stern voice of the presiding judge, echoing off the richly paneled walls of the Birmingham courthouse, seemed to seal the fate of a man who had long wielded unchecked power. In that charged moment, the atmosphere shifted from shock to an emerging resolve for justice. Shortly after the suspension announcement, the courtroom atmosphere was reconfigured into an impromptu hearing. Nathan Reed, still standing resolute despite the earlier physical assault, now took on the role of an accuser and catalyst for change. With a composed demeanor that belied the chaos moments prior, he stepped forward and began the hearing. His voice, measured yet unwavering, filled the space as he addressed the gathering of legal professionals, attorneys, and members of the press. Today, based on the recorded evidence and prior complaints captured on badge cameras and documented by several victims, we bring before you clear indications of repeated misconduct by Officer Rurk. This is not a singular incident, but a pattern of behavior that undermines the very essence of our duty to serve and protect without prejudice. As Nathan spoke, his words were backed by a series of meticulously compiled files he had presented earlier, digital recordings capturing Rurk's contemptuous interactions with black civilians, copies of formal complaints lodged by affected community members, and testimonies from colleagues who had long been silenced by her intimidating presence. The evidence was as damning as it was detailed, revealing not only the brutality of her assault on him, but also the long history of racist behavior she had concealed behind the facade of authority. Every word Nathan uttered was punctuated by the occasional tap of his gavel-like voice over the stern murmur of those present. Across the room, the tension was palpable among the cabinet of police officials and legal advisors gathered at the back. The police chief, whose earlier reluctance had been wrapped in layers of bureaucratic loyalty, now found himself forced to acknowledge the weight of the evidence. With a restrained gravity, he spoke into a microphone set up for the hearing. Effective immediately, Officer Tiffany Rurk is suspended from duty, pending a comprehensive investigation by an independent panel. Further, I order that all official records relating to her conduct in the past 5 years be reviewed for any signs of misconduct. His voice, though measured, carried an unmistakable note of finality that rippled through the assembled crowd. In that defining moment, reports of Rurk's past transgressions, long suppressed by influential allies, began to surface with renewed clarity. Internally, voices once silenced by intimidation now found the courage to speak out. One by one, several civilians and fellow officers came forward with grievances, each testimony underscored by the authenticity of their recorded experiences. Among the documents introduced, a series of time-stamped videos and handwritten depositions painted a damning picture. Rurk had systematically humiliated minorities, tolerated by an unaccountable network in the department. Bentley, the police lieutenant who had once supported Rurk's objection, shifted in his seat as the mounting evidence pressed in. His previously artful denials faltered when confronted by the undeniable clarity of video records, casting a pall over his earlier assurances. The murmurs around the courtroom crescendoed into low, urgent voices as Nathan continued. These documents, this evidence, show that Officer Rurk's actions are not isolated acts of dereliction. They are symptomatic of a deeply rooted systemic failure. It is imperative that we hold those responsible accountable, not only to restore the faith of our community, but to ensure that our institution is no longer a safe haven for prejudice. As the hearing neared its climax, all eyes turned toward Tiffany Rurk. A solitary spotlight from the high windows illuminated her face, which now bore the weight of mounting guilt and fragile defiance. Her once assured expression had crumbled to reveal trembling uncertainty. The press quickly captured every moment, and the digital display in the courtroom replayed excerpts of the damning footage. Scenes where she had sneered at black drivers, uttered demeaning remarks, and, most recently, assaulted Nathan with brutal force. Her protest, when she finally attempted to speak, was weak and halting. I did only what I believed was necessary, she stuttered, her tone strained beyond recognition in the light of overwhelming testimony. But her defense was drowned by the collective voice of the courtroom. The judge's final words on her conduct reverberated as an unyielding decree. Officer Tiffany Rurk, based on the evidence presented and the grave breach of ethical conduct revealed, you are hereby charged with abuse of power and racial discrimination. Your actions have not only violated the trust of this court, but have damaged the lives of countless citizens who depended on impartial justice. The courtroom fell into a heavy, reflective silence, broken only by the soft murmurs of those who bore witness to this historic moment of reckoning. In that moment, Nathan Reed, still dignified despite his handcuffs, epitomized a quiet vengeance and unyielding commitment to the truth. The stage was set not only for the punishment of one officer but for a broader, overdue recalibration of the entire system. The legacy of Officer Rurk's unchecked power was now collapsing under the weight of undeniable evidence. And as the final words echoed in the grand space, it was clear that the road to reform had just begun. In the days following the dramatic courtroom hearing, the fallout spread rapidly beyond the austere walls of the Birmingham courthouse. The news of Officer Tiffany Rurk's suspension and the damning evidence of her systemic misconduct ignited a firestorm of investigation and public outrage. Back at the police department, long-hidden records re-emerged as internal audits revealed a disturbing pattern. Countless dashcam and bodycam recordings capturing Tiffany's demeaning interactions with black citizens, formal complaints that had been quietly dismissed by higher-ups, and confidential testimonies from colleagues who could no longer remain silent. With every new piece of evidence surfacing, the once formidable reputation of Officer Rurk began to crumble like an old, brittle facade. Late one afternoon, in a stark, fluorescent-lit briefing room at the department headquarters, the police chief convened a special meeting with senior officers and internal affairs investigators. Tension filled the sterile space as voices, once hushed in deference to Tiffany's unchallenged authority, now rose in a chorus demanding accountability and reform. "We have enough evidence," the chief stated gravely, tapping a thick folder on the table. Officer Rurk's actions, documented over the past 5 years, represent a clear abuse of power and racial discrimination. It's time to dismantle the culture that allowed this behavior to persist. His words carried not only the weight of official responsibility, but also a personal betrayal that this trusted officer had become a symbol of injustice. Within that room, critical emails and memos were shared on laptops, and the atmosphere grew even more charged as the investigators laid out every recorded incident and every damning testimonial. The mood turned somber as they discussed how Tiffany's network of protection had shielded her, but now the relentless surge of evidence had undone those defenses. "Her empire is collapsing," one veteran officer murmured, echoing what many felt deep in their bones. "We must act decisively to show that prejudice will no longer be tolerated." The meeting resolved unanimously. Officer Tiffany Rurk would be terminated, and an independent review board would be established to inspect all departmental practices with a view to eradicating any semblance of bias. News of the decision spread with astonishing speed, amplified by social media and local press coverage. Headlines such as "Officer Rurk's Reign of Prejudice Ends," "Department Overhauls Its Policies," blazed in newspapers and online forums, and community leaders applauded the swift and just response. Amid the media frenzy, several high-ranking officials were forced to testify about the previous failures in oversight that had allowed Tiffany's misconduct to fester. Her former allies within the department found themselves isolated and facing disciplinary action for their complicity, while others spoke about the urgent need for a cultural reset. As internal investigations reached their peak, Officer Rurk found herself summoned to a final, grim meeting with departmental leaders. In a stark, minimally furnished conference room overcast by the harsh glare of overhead lights, she was confronted with the entirety of the damning evidence. One senior officer, his voice steady but cold, laid out the facts. "Tiffany, the recordings, the anonymous complaints, and witness statements confirm a pattern of behavior that is indefensible. You have abused your position repeatedly, and your actions have not only harmed individuals, but have tarnished the credibility of this department." Her eyes, once burning with a misplaced sense of pride, now darted nervously around the room. The gravity of the moment was evident on her face as she attempted a feeble justification. "I did what I thought was necessary." But her words dissolved under the weight of the overwhelming evidence. It soon became clear that there was no path of reconciliation. In a final pronouncement etched with finality, the chief announced, "Effective immediately, you are terminated from duty. Your record of misconduct and racial discrimination will be permanently expunged from our system, and further proceedings will follow." Among the gathered group, a heavy silence fell, a collective recognition that one era of unchecked prejudice was drawing to a close. The officer's expression crumbled. The once formidable Tiffany, known for her abrasive manner, now looked diminished and defeated. Within hours, further actions were set in motion to reform the police department's culture. The Internal Review Board, now empowered to oversee a total departmental overhaul, implemented mandatory sensitivity training, revamped recruitment policies, and introduced new accountability measures aimed at fostering a culture of respect and equality. Staff meetings were held to deliberate over the painful lessons learned, and efforts to mend relationships with the community were accelerated. The fallout forced senior officials to acknowledge the systemic failures that had allowed such prejudiced behavior to go unchecked for so long. As part of the sweeping reforms, the department's public relations team organized a press conference where officials promised transparency and accountability moving forward. The phrase "a new era of justice" echoed from news networks around the country, and many local citizens, once skeptical of the system, began to restore their faith in the institution. The wave of changes rippled through every level of the department, marking a turning point that would be remembered as a seminal moment in the fight against institutional racism. Meanwhile, the scene at the courthouse and the subsequent disciplinary process became the catalyst for broader societal discussions. Community forums, local news panels, and online debates revolved around the idea that no one, regardless of rank or power, was above the law. Officer Tiffany Rurk's once seemingly unassailable position had been utterly dismantled by the cumulative force of truth and accountability. As the day came to its close, the once mighty empire of Tiffany's influence was in ruins. Papers, messages, and digital evidence sprawled across screens and paperwork, attesting to the long history of abuse that had defined her tenure. The department's leadership, once mired in complicity, now saw red marks on every record as they pledged to rebuild a system founded on integrity. In that moment, with an air of somber inevitability, the collapse of Officer Rurk's career symbolized not just personal ruin but the beginning of a systemic transformation that promised a fairer, more just environment for every citizen. In the weeks that followed the courtroom spectacle, a seismic shift rippled through both the police department and the community of Birmingham. The aftermath of Officer Tiffany Rurk's public disgrace spread far beyond the courthouse doors. The scandal, covered extensively by local media and dissected in heated town hall meetings, became a catalyst for deep introspection and institutional reform in a city long marred by systemic bias. Tiffany Rurk, once notorious for her unwavering arrogance and racist antics, now found herself adrift in a world that had suddenly turned its back on her. Her dismissal cascaded into further disciplinary measures. Internal investigations unearthed a pattern of abusive behavior spanning years, and many of her erstwhile allies, fellow officers who had once shielded her, were now examined under a microscope of accountability. The department's leadership, determined to restore public trust, initiated an aggressive overhaul of its procedures. Mandatory sensitivity training and new protocols to guarantee unbiased policing were implemented with such urgency that even the echo of past transgressions could no longer be ignored. Amid heated boardroom talks and community forums, senior officials admitted long suppressing complaints had allowed prejudice to fester, and swore that no one, not even a decorated officer, would be above the law. For Tiffany, the inevitable collapse was both swift and shattering. Once envied for her iron grip on power, she now struggled with legal battles and mounting lawsuits initiated by aggrieved citizens. The relentless scrutiny and damning digital evidence, the dashcam footage, the meticulously preserved witness testimonies, even the bitter recordings of hateful tirades, formed an impenetrable wall around her former reputation. Facing a barrage of public outrage, Tiffany's personal life unraveled as well. Friends, colleagues, and even those in her close circle began to distance themselves, leaving her isolated. Within weeks, she was forced to resign from her position, and a string of court orders and civil suits left her with no choice but to sell her home and relocate to an unfamiliar city. In a final, crushing blow, the very network that once protected her now abandoned her, and she sank into obscurity, a stark warning of the price one pays for unchecked abuse of power. Meanwhile, Nathan Reed's unyielding composure and quiet assertion of his rightful authority transformed him into a living symbol of justice and resilience. Though he had been physically attacked and momentarily restrained, his dignified response, a calm declaration of identity and an unwavering commitment to truth, had left an indelible mark on everyone present that day. In the days following his powerful testimony, Nathan's story dominated local news cycles. His recorded evidence, now circulating widely on social media under hashtags like #JusticeForReed and #NoOneIsAboveTheLaw, compelled citizens to demand accountability from an institution that had long been criticized for its indifference to discrimination. Community leaders and activists seized on Nathan's example, organizing rallies and public discussions aimed at overhauling entrenched practices not only in policing but throughout the city's justice system. In a series of public forums held at local community centers and city halls, residents shared their own stories of injustice and rallied for systemic reform. The palpable sense of empowerment among these gatherings underscored a broader cultural change, a collective demand that fairness and respect must now be the cornerstone of public service and governance. Back at the police department headquarters, the Internal Review Board worked tirelessly to implement new reforms. The department's new code of ethics explicitly mandated zero tolerance for bias and an unwavering commitment to protect all citizens equally. Senior officers, under increased scrutiny, now conducted regular community outreach programs and participated in transparency meetings, slowly rebuilding a trust that had been shattered by months of scandal. Newspapers headlined articles such as "A New Dawn in Birmingham," "How One Incident Sparked Systemic Change," and "From Prejudice to Reform, the Fall of a Racist Cop." Legal experts and sociologists alike debated the implications of this turning point, heralding the event as a watershed moment for the community. Amid this transformative period, Nathan Reed was honored at a ceremonial gathering held at the courthouse. In a solemn ceremony attended by civic leaders, members of the legal community, and uplifted citizens, he was commended for his courage. "Your calm and steady voice has become a beacon for justice in our community," one of the speakers declared, and the crowd burst into subdued applause, a mixture of relief, hope, and a promise of continued vigilance against injustice. As dusk descended over Birmingham, the city seemed to pulse with a renewed sense of purpose. Every conversation in coffee shops, every post on community forums, and every mention in local newspapers resonated with the belief that if one courageous individual could challenge a system entrenched in prejudice, then true reform was possible. The fall of Officer Tiffany Rurk became a somber reminder that no one is above accountability, while Nathan Reed's dignified stand ignited a collective drive toward equity, transparency, and institutional responsibility. In this new era, the ripples of change reached every corner of the community, from the halls of the courthouse to the everyday interactions on city streets. Though the scars of past injustices would take time to heal, the people of Birmingham now looked to the future with cautious optimism, knowing that the price of silence had finally been paid. What do you think is the most important lesson we can learn from Officer Rurk's downfall and Judge Nathan Reed's unwavering defense of justice? Have you ever witnessed a moment when accountability transformed an entire system? Write your opinion in the comments. We'd love to hear your perspective. I hope you enjoyed this story. Leave a comment, sharing your thoughts about it. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new and equally exciting stories. See you in the next video.